Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. More DDO, I think. The first DDO video I showed you was of a quest that is fairly generic and quite dull. This, on the other hand, not so much. This has a reputation. There's a reason this quest has a reputation. It's called Proof is in the Poison, and it is incredibly hard. And, more to the point, it's level 4. Now, I'm going in here at level 6, and I thought, because I actually had no prior knowledge of this quest before I did it, I found out after the fact that Proof in the Poison is notoriously difficult. So, I went in here thinking, shouldn't be a problem. Everything will be just fine. It's a level 4 quest, and I'm level 6. No problem. Not quite. Right, so DDO really has no qualms about crushing you completely. And that's actually alright. In fact, it's very, very cool indeed. The difficulty of quests often varies wildly. However, I should point out that it usually warns you. And it also gives you the opportunity to downrank the quest to a easier level. I'm playing on normal right here, which for most quests is balanced around either reasonable soloing classes or small parties. So, unlike, say, a dungeon in WoW where you'll take a 5-man group, in this, you don't really have to. You can solo a lot of content, or you can do small group. You can have kind of whatever group composition you want, but you may run into problems if you decide to have the wrong group comp. It's not really set, and doing stuff on Elite, however, you know, doing it on the really, really hard difficulties, which reward you with much better loot, they require a properly balanced 6-man group that is coordinated and skilled. Good luck pugging them, let me put it that way. That said, I mean, the game does have inbuilt voice chat, which actually works pretty well, and people in this game seem to be used to the fact that stuff can't just be rolled over. So, what's going on with this one? Well, this is a very long quest that has a lot of casting mobs, and it also has these guys who are fairly irritating. They cast a spell called Grease. Grease is an interesting spell. I can get that as a bard, as a level 1 spell, if I so desire. I'm just mucking around with my action bars here, trying to get things sorted out in the way they should be. Grease causes an area of effect puddle of grease on the ground, and anything within it has to roll, I think it's a dexterity check, or they fall flat on their ass. And I do mean everything in it. That includes you, that includes your friends, that includes enemies, hirelings, pets, whatever the hell. Grease can send them flat on their ass. And actually, when I used to play this game about a year ago, we had this small group, and it's actually the same kind of group that my guild is right now. And I'd just like to point out, by the way, that those of you who watched the introductory video where I said we had a guild, that was from over a year ago. The current guild that I'm in is just me and my friends, and we're not actually accepting new members at the moment. That may change in future, but I will let you know if that's the case, if there's some kind of guild set up for people. Anyway, Grease, yes. It became a running joke, and in fact a source of amusement for me and infuriation for the rest of my group that I would use Grease, and that would often cause our tank to fall flat on his ass, because our tank, of course, had fairly low dexterity and was also wearing heavy armor, and yeah, it wasn't pleasant. So, this bridge right here, it's covered in casters, and this is actually what makes this dungeon/quest extremely unpleasant. Casters in this game are very, very dangerous, and I do mean very dangerous. They use the kind of spells that you have access to. That's what makes them scary. Those arrows and things, you can learn that. You can learn that spell. They will cast that same spell at you. They don't have custom effects. They just use spells that are also available to players. Now, sometimes, of course, those spells are powered down a bit, but generally speaking, they have some fairly nasty effects. You got this one right here. The acid arrow is really nasty because it applies a constant acid dot. Causes you all sorts of problems. So, what you tend to find is that if you go into dungeons like this, you want to be well prepared with things like resistance potions and protection from X and Y. It's a very good idea. Now, also bear in mind that DDO has no problems with causing you a whole heap of issues. I pull a lever, oh, there's traps everywhere. Oh, that's great. It doesn't have a problem with dicking you over. And this is why dungeons like this are actually designed for full parties. Generally, if you're doing this properly, what you'll have here is you'll have a rogue, detect traps. Yeah, you'll have a rogue scouting ahead looking for traps, and he'll spot those, he'll be able to disarm them. Most traps can be disarmed. Not all. Some have to simply be dodged, and they're just there to be obstacles. And you can roll under them, or there are things like, say, jumping puzzles and stuff like that you have to do in order to get through the dungeon. And some might say, well, that seems entirely normal. It seems reasonable that you would need a full group for a dungeon. No, because that's not how the game works. DDO makes no distinction between questing and dungeons. This is something you have to understand. Every quest is in a dungeon. Well, that's not entirely true, but pretty much every quest is in an instance. In fact, all of them are definitely in an instance. And whether or not that be questing in an adventure area, which is a fairly open area which requires you to, say, get a bunch of kills, hunt down some rare monsters, and locate various landmarks. Usually in this adventure area, you can discover other dungeons that can be entered, and more often than not, you can just go into them. You don't even need the quest for it. So you can discover quests and dungeons that you otherwise wouldn't know were there. That's the point of an adventure area. However, in the case of questing, it's done in an instance, and that instance may be outdoors, or it may be in a dungeon, like this one, and more often than not, it is in a dungeon. The game is called Dungeons and Dragons. There are both dragons and dungeons in this game. Admittedly, there are significantly more dungeons than there are dragons, because, hey, dragons are actually really hard. You shouldn't be killing dragons at level 4, and indeed you don't. The first dragon that you encounter is on the starting island, and you don't get to kill it. You take part in the operation, but you don't even go anywhere near the dragon. It doesn't let you. It's like, no, you can't go near the dragon, you're level 2. What, you crazy? No, you'll just die instantly. Yeah, so let's use Potion of Resist Electricity, because that'll work. I'm just popping a few pots here to try and save myself on mana, and this is something that I rapidly realized as I was going into this dungeon. My god, I've just used 2/3 of my mana. I'm not even past the first bridge yet. And you might think, well, that's fine, you just sit down and drink. No, you can't do that. No, you cannot. Oh my, you cannot do that. The only way to regain mana is to find a rest shrine, and as it turns out, the rest shrine in this dungeon is very far in. Very far in, which makes this dungeon a endurance test, and it's also one of the reasons why this dungeon is designed for parties and not for soloing. It simply comes down to the fact that, say, as a bard, I can heal. Sure, no problem. Unfortunately, I don't have a great mana reserve. I'm not the best healer in the game. Bards really are kind of jack-of-all-trades characters, with an emphasis on crowd control and buffs. They can be built to do pretty much anything. You know, I can off-tank in a pinch, and I can do so fairly well. You see, I've got a pretty good sword right there and a shield, and I'm wearing mithril armor right here, which means that I can take quite a pounding, at least from melee attacks. Not from magic, as you can see right there, and since a lot of these guys are actually casters, it's problematic. But I'm nowhere near as good as a fighter would be, or a paladin, or even a Favoured Soul, who are not ideal tanks, but you can build them that way, and I really need to unbind that key. I do find that quite interesting. The game doesn't see the need to balance itself around suboptimal parties. It's like, no, you can't do this. For instance, if you walked into this dungeon with 6 bards, yeah, it's like, oh, I go 6 bards, derp, because bards can do everything. Well, you're about to find out that's a terrible idea. There are parts of these dungeons that are simply not doable. And you just can't. You cannot do them without certain skills or abilities. There are sometimes ways past it. And what I'm about to show you, I think when I get through this area and clear these casters out, is there's a door. I can't get through it. The door is locked. And my character is not strong enough to bash it down. So that means one of two things. Either I have to pick it, which I also can't do because I don't have the necessary skill. I'm not a rogue. You could, if you want, take a level in Rogue, and it would allow you to do that. But I should also point out that doing so does kind of gimp your character a little bit. Multiclassing in this game is allowed. You can actually take a level in whatever class you want. There is really no limit on it. You can mix it up completely. There are some builds that work really well, and there are some builds that don't. And that's the thing. I wanted to play a pure bard, so taking one level in Rogue for me so I can maybe get lockpicking and deal with that. No, I don't want to do that because that actually ruins my build. And we're talking a level here. A level in this game matters a lot more than the level in WoW. 85 levels in WoW, where maybe you get a talent point every 2 levels. Here, a level consists of all sorts of things. I mean, for one thing, a level consists of 5 ranks, which also get action points which can be spent on various enhancements. So it's a big deal to spend one of your levels in a different character slot, because you're not going to be able to get your character up to the kind of power that you really want it to be. Now, there's that door, as I was saying right here, and either you have to pick it or you have to bash it, and I actually cannot do either, because I cannot lockpick and I do not have the requisite strength in order to bash it. So, in the meantime, I'm going to clear out a few crates right here so that I can get the Destructibles bonus. As it turns out, you need about 200 Destructibles in here to actually get the experience modifier bonus in this dungeon. As I said, it is a large dungeon, incredibly large, big, difficult dungeon. So, I'm thinking, well, how am I going to deal with this door? Because I can't break it down, as you can see, and I can't pick it either. So, my solution was quite simple. After looking around to see if there were any hidden doors, which there clearly were not, I have detect hidden doors on, so I would have been able to see them. I decided I'm going to bring a friend along. I need a friend. I need somebody to help me out with this, so I'm going to bring along my friend Albus, who is a tank. More specifically, he is the fighter class, and he will have the strength in order to bash this door down. And there you go. So Albus should be able to smash his way through that without too much of a problem. There we go. Oh, we found spiders. How wonderful. So I'm going to buff everybody up a little bit there. As you can see, the bard actually has the ability to play various songs. Now, songs are kind of cool because they don't take mana, but you only have a certain number of them before you go to a rest shrine. A rest shrine will reset all of your buffs, and it will return all of your mana to full, and any limited use abilities, like, say, my protection from evil buff that I have on my charismatic cloak, you can see on my bar right there on number 4, or my bard songs, they'll all be refilled by a rest shrine as well. Now, you will hear a little bit of Ventrilo going on in the background, because communication was kind of needed in this dungeon. Neither of us had been in here before. Now, Alvis, I believe, is level 6, and I'm also level 6, so we thought, you know, 2 level 6s should be able to take on a level 4 dungeon. No. This dungeon is actually known as an extreme challenge dungeon, and it's kind of weird. I think it's because we are higher level than it. It didn't display the warning, but if you are that level and you go to this dungeon, say you're level 4, it's a level 4 dungeon, it will say, this dungeon presents an extreme challenge. It also tells you the length of the dungeon. It says the dungeon is very long, and it also says this dungeon is challenging and requires a balanced party. Usually when they say balanced party, they actually do mean it. And more often than not, the dungeon will incorporate some element that requires your party. For instance, I went to one in the Necropolis, and I thought, I'm going to solo this one. I should be okay. No. Why? Because there are switches that you have to pull simultaneously with multiple characters. You have to actually stand on these little blocks, and I think you need at least 3 people to do that in order to unlock the gate. And if you don't have that, you can't do it. Now, if you do want to solo a lot of content, you can get things called hirelings, and hirelings are, as you would expect, NPC-controlled characters. You can give them orders and things like that, and they're generally pretty competent, and it's useful to maybe bring them along. Obviously, they cost money to get a hireling, but you can bring them along. The thing is that some of these quests, the hirelings just aren't good enough, and indeed in that Necropolis dungeon I was talking about there, it says hirelings may not suffice. And usually if it says that, it means there is an ability here that requires an actual human powering it, because there's no way a hireling will do it. This actually has the same issue. And maybe you could have a hireling bash down that door, certainly. I don't know if that's actually possible. Again, I don't know a huge amount about this game. But there are bits later on that you definitely can't have a hireling doing. You need actual human dexterity in order to get past them. And I'm talking actually about jumping puzzles. Yes, there are jumping puzzles in this game. They are okay with putting things like that in. And hell, there are actually some dungeons that have real puzzles in it. For instance, one of the puzzles in the starting zone is actually a kind of Pipe Mania style thing to redirect a flow of energy in order to activate some frost projectors and things like that. So, yeah, that's kind of a big deal. Oh, Grease, you are the best. I'm sorry, I love it. It even makes the enemies fall over on it. Now, these guys actually really do hurt. There are a lot of casters going on right here, and obviously our tank is taking a bit of punishment. He does have a very large health pool, and as you'll also notice, he's able to use potions. This is something about this game that WoW doesn't have. WoW actually made it kind of a dirty word to use potions. The only potion you should use in WoW is a flask, you know. And if you use a potion during a fight, then it puts it on cooldown for the rest of the fight. This game has no problem with you chugging health pots. And that's actually really cool because it means you don't necessarily have to rely on a healer. You can do a dungeon with 6 people, assuming that it doesn't have elements like things that you have to unlock or traps that will kill you if you don't disarm them and stuff like that. you could just use potions if you wanted. It's doable. It's pricey, for obvious reasons. You're using consumables. I believe Alvis told me at the end of this he'd popped about 60 potions. And obviously this dungeon was not designed to be two-man, but hey, you know, we did it anyway. It's just cool that you can do that. Like, as a tank, you can chug health pots. Why not? I think there's all too many MMOs that are kind of scared of that idea. It's old school. There's a lot about this game that I would define as old school, and I think it really benefits from being old school, because you know what? I'm kind of sick of the new school of MMOs, I really, really am. If WoW represents now the new school of MMOs, then the new school can go to hell, and I'd quite happily go back to a time where that stuff didn't happen, and DDO sort of represents that. DDO's a very odd game in that way, because I think Turbine just said, you know what, we're just going to make the game the way we want, and we're not going to base anything on anything. We don't care. It's like, if we think guild airships is a cool idea, we're going to put in goddamn guild airships. It's like, oh, but I can't get an airship if I'm not in a guild. We don't care. Go away. Simple as that. So, oh, you know, my guild's not big enough. It's like, well, we'll give you an XP bonus, but still you're going to have to work your ass off in order to get an airship. And airships are very beneficial. There's a huge amount of things you can do with an airship. Basically, an airship is a modular, customizable guild hall. You know, that was their idea. It's like, well, we could have guild housing, but now we're just going to have guild airships. Why? Because it's frickin' Eberron. And anyone that knows the DDO setting knows that Eberron is sort of techno-magic airship pulpy setting, and they do represent that quite nicely. I mean, a lot of the quests in this game are very cheesy, for instance, and even the Dungeon Master voice is very cheesy. The thing is, that's what Eberron is. If you know anything about Eberron at all, it's very much like that. It also leads to some excellent aesthetics in a lot of these places. All sorts of crazy stuff going on. I mean, if you wander around Stormreach, you'll see it's a very well-realized city. Admittedly, it is pretty much the only city in the game, because they don't bother with building other cities. It's like, well, we don't need one. But Stormreach is also bigger than every city in any game ever. It is absolutely enormous. It is so enormous that it has multiple areas that you have to zone into. It is huge. Stormreach is massive. Hell, before they really went all out with this game, back when the game first kind of launched, the only questing there was in the game was actually in Stormreach. It was as simple as that. That has now changed. There is an awful lot more. There's more variety that they're putting, because they have added a huge amount of content to this game since it came out. Yeah, there you go. Guild airships, folks. And as I said before, it comes down to the fact that I think Turbine are confident enough in their own development talents that they don't need to think, well, what are other games doing? And, oh, well, we can't do this because it's, you know, some people might not like it. And it's like, well, they turn around and say, but we don't care. It's our game. You will play it the way that we want you to play it. And if you don't like it, we don't care. I mean, this game apparently has about 3 million players. Obviously, a lot of them are free-to-players, but they claim that their income actually increased by 500% when this game went free-to-play, because their freemium model, as they like to call it, is actually quite good. You know, it's a good, solid model, and people seem to like it. As far as I'm concerned, the way that DDO does things is the way that other MMOs should really, really look at, because it comes down to the fact that people want to experience content at different paces, and often a subscription fee is not ideal for some people. Like, oh, sub fee, $15 a month, but oh, I'm only going to play this game a few hours a month or whatever, or maybe I just want to dip in and out. There might be months where I don't play DDO. It's like, well, you can do that, that's fine. It's not a problem. Hell, you can continue playing even if you unsub, but your account will become limited. But if there are, say, some adventures you want to do, then there's ways and means to do that. Either you can buy the adventure pack to access it, you can resubscribe to access it, or you can have your friends get you a guest pass with Turbine points, which is actually really, really cheap. And then you can pop in with friends when you want to, but you don't have to be subscribed to the game. I think it shows a tremendous amount of respect for the customer there. I really, really do. And some people will turn around and say, well, this cash shop thing sounds really bad. Or you can buy weapons, and you can buy all sorts of different stuff, buffs and things like that. It's like, well, yeah, you can. But I think you've got to understand that DDO doesn't really adhere to the same rules that World of Warcraft does. I think if you did that in WoW, people would be up in arms. But if you do it in DDO, it's because it's a free-to-play game that gives you a lot of different choices about how you approach it. And by approaching, I'm talking about it financially. Like, it is okay to play DDO incredibly casually, because you're not actually going to run into a situation where you are paying a subscription fee for something you're not playing. Not playing it? Unsub. oh, I feel like dipping back into DDO, but I really don't want to resub. Not a problem. Go for it. It is an interesting model. It really, really is. It's something that other MMOs should be looking at, certainly. I don't think it's perfect. For instance, when you're subscribed, you actually get turbine points every month. So you can actually get some cool stuff from the cash shop. I don't think you maybe get enough, because you get 500, which... that's not a huge amount. There are other ways to earn turbine points. You can actually earn it with favor points that you earn in the game as well. Every now and then, once you reach a milestone of that, you will end up getting some bonuses there. But it would be nice if they gave you more turbine points, I think. And oh my god, my face, that hurts. There you go. This is a fairly ideal time to show you the death system. But anyway, as I was saying, it would be cool for them to have more turbine points for your subscription. I think that would be a reasonable thing to do. Personally, I'm not short of turbine points. I've got about 28,000 from referrals or whatever, so it's not really a big deal. But still, it would be nice. Right, let's talk about the death system, because it's weird. So, when you die, you drop a soul stone, and a party member can pick up that soul stone. And what you can then do is you can follow behind, and you have to be within a certain range of them at all times, so you can't go scouting all the way ahead, but you can still be a scout for your party if you like while you're dead. A little bit, anyway. You can see what's around the corner before people run into it. You can see if you can maybe spot some traps. Admittedly, you can't trigger them when you're dead, but you can say, oh, look, you know, this looks like an activation panel. It looks like there's something here or whatever. So, it is kind of problematic, but you can follow your party around, and once they get to a resurrection shrine, which are usually next to rest shrines, you can be resurrected. There is no res function in the way that you understand it within WoW. That just isn't in the game. If somebody dies, then they are knocked out for a while. Now, in this case, we realized that the rest shrine was too far ahead for me to bother, so I just released, and I ran back into the dungeon. Now, having somebody die in the dungeon actually kind of sucks, because you lose a small experience bonus you would get from doing a flawless run. I like the fact that it rewards that kind of skilled play. Again, it's not a major deal. It doesn't take experience away from you. It just cancels out a bonus that you otherwise would have had. So when you release, you end up in a spirit-bound location, which is more often than not in a pub or inn. Yeah, you'll spirit bind into an inn of your choice, and when you die, you go back to the spirit binder. You will go back there with no HP and no mana. So what you then have to do is you have to regain that HP and mana, and the best way to do it is actually by buying food and drink. And you can only eat food and drink within the inn. Yeah, so you buy the food and drink, and there are various types of it depending on how quickly you want to get back into the fight or how much mana and HP you've got. And as a result, you will regain that mana and health over a certain amount of time. And once you're done, you can leave the inn, and it can go back into the dungeon as if nothing ever happened. It's pretty cool, actually, and once again, is kind of convention-defying. Now, as you can see, Alrus took all of his clothes off. Why did he do that? It's a jumping puzzle. And yes, the weight of your armor does affect the ability to jump, as does a complete lack of jumping skill, as Alrus almost kills himself right there in that pool of acid. Of course, there are other ways. If you pop, say, some heavy acid-resistant spells or potions, you could probably just run through that. But generally speaking, those kind of death traps are extremely dangerous. Alrus only just survived. One more tick of that, and that would have killed him outright. And that would have been unpleasant. I like the fact that that's just even in the game. As I said, this game plays with dangerous old-school concepts. For instance, did you know that if you're wearing heavy armor, you're a terrible swimmer in this game? And yes, there are areas where you have to swim. When you're wearing heavier armor, your breath bar goes down faster. So, more often than not, if you're trying to swim around in plate armor, you'll actually drown. So, WoW would never do this. In fact, most modern MMOs would never do this. They're too scared of it. DDO actually doesn't care. It is unapologetically old school. And that, I think, is what I really get a kick out of in this game. As you can see right there, we managed to grab some collectibles from that alchemy table. you can often find things like this in dungeons, and collectibles can be handed into all sorts of different vendors in order to get randomly generated rewards. Certain vendors tend to give you certain things, but it's a good way to get loot. I mean, this game is about getting loot almost all the time. You get so much more loot in this game than you do in any other, and more often than not, a lot of that loot is fairly transient, and either you'll be selling it or you'll be putting it on the auction house because a lot of it is randomly generated, so you can end up with something that's actually very desirable. As I said, most people do have multiple weapon sets and armor sets because they have different benefits. For instance, you can build a set of resistance gear, and once again, this game is not scared of having resistance gear. Although, in the case of this game, resistance gear is more of, well, this is helpful, as opposed to, oh my god, you really, really need this. It's like, it would be kind of nice to have this resistance gear just in case I happen to run up against these monsters. For instance, if I knew beforehand, if I say check the wiki for this dungeon, I would know that there are an awful lot of mobs that cast Haf's acid arrow. So I would be thinking, what if I get some acid resistance gear? Or what if I get some acid resistance potions? And that's probably the best idea. Grab some acid resistance potions. Why not? They don't cost all that much. Or get a wand of acid resistance and use that. That would be kind of helpful. It's not the only thing they cast, but it's certainly the thing that does the most damage. So that's definitely worth considering. Once again, I like the fact that you are encouraged to use all of the tools at your disposal, and those tools, generally speaking, are not readily available to you by just taking your ass into the dungeon. You have to prepare. You have to bring things along with you. You're thinking, oh, well, I'm having trouble here, then popping out of the dungeon and going and getting something specific for that dungeon might be quite helpful. As you can see, this is a fairly lengthy dungeon. We're still in it, and it's not typical to see dungeons this long, but they do exist. Once again, something to remember, there is no difference between questing and dungeons in this game. None. They are the same thing. DDO does not distinguish between the two. Some quests you cannot really solo, but there is usually a casual difficulty setting which will allow you to do just that. These dungeons have 4 difficulty settings. Bear in mind, this is on normal. This is a pretty challenging dungeon. Yeah, we are doing it with just 2 people, but we overlevel the dungeon by 2 levels, which is quite significant. Oh, it's more significant than it would be in WoW, because there's only 20 levels in this game. So, effectively, we overlevel this dungeon by 10 ranks, and that's the most important thing to consider. Oh, hey, find some slime. Gotta be kind of careful with those things. Watch out for oozes in this game and rust monsters. Oh, yes, they will happily just destroy your weapons, and lots of repair costs, let me put it that way. They don't completely disappear from your inventory, you can get them repaired, but hell, you may have even noticed in, I think, my last video, I lost items from my inventory. They were actually destroyed. Usually, like, minor consumable items and things like arrows and bolts, they can be destroyed if you get hit too hard, and oh, thank God we found the rest shrine. It took a long, long time to find this, and this is actually the only rest shrine in this dungeon, as far as I'm aware. There isn't a hidden rest shrine behind a hidden door or anything, so it's a little bit stressful. Okay, I'm going to skip forward towards the end of this dungeon. I'll show you a couple more things which are kind of neat about it before I do, but we were in this dungeon probably for a good hour. Admittedly, good rewards for it. Really, really good rewards. I mean, I probably got half a rank's worth of experience just from doing this, so it's definitely worthwhile. So there's another jumping puzzle as we discovered. Oh my, it's quite the jumping puzzle as well. You've got to be incredibly careful over a large pit of acid right here. Now, we discovered later on that most of this jumping puzzle can actually be avoided by going around the side, but at least one person has to traverse this in order to gain access to a switch to open the next area. So that would be why you want a rogue with you, because generally speaking, rogues have very high dexterity, and you would say, right, we're just sending the rogue up there to have a look and see what's up. So I think the next time we do this dungeon, I mean, we might try and do this dungeon on Hard or Elite with a full party, and yes, we will need a full party. It is a very low-level dungeon, so the rewards won't be all that great gear-wise. Experience-wise, sure, no problem. Remember that every time that you do a dungeon for the first time on a particular difficulty, you gain an experience bonus. And on Elite, it's 50%, so that's a very significant XP bonus. Admittedly, this dungeon will also be balls to the wall hard, but it's enjoyable. So you'd send a rogue up there to traverse it, and in this case, Alvis decided, I'm just going to go up there anyway, and he's fortunate not to fall into the acid and die, and he's able to activate the switch, and then we can just head on back. So I just like the fact that this is here. Where is this in other MMOs? It's not there. It's as simple as that. They don't dare. Imagine this in WoW. Imagine how much whining there would be for this. And hell, just bear in mind as well that dying in this dungeon is way more significant than WoW. If somebody falls down this and dies, you go like, ah, no, blah, 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 and then they just get rezzed. Here, you can't do that. You just cannot. Ouch. My feet seize. Ugh. Right, okay, we'll go and skip forward just a little bit more, and I'll see what else is in this dungeon. There's a couple of mini-bosses here, and then there's the final boss, which is pretty tricky. So we found another jumping puzzle. The acid pit, and you can see there's a switch over the other side. So, I will do this jumping puzzle while you just hang around there. The thing is, we didn't actually know what this jumping puzzle was going to do, and this element of mystery is kind of neat. And you might think, well, the mystery will just go when you do this dungeon like 50 times. No, it's not the same as WoW. There are hundreds of these things, and I do mean hundreds. That's every quest is like this. To a greater or lesser extent. They're not all as long and as complex as this, but every quest is in a dungeon. So, generally speaking, you don't actually have to go back and do this multiple times. You can on different difficulties, but usually, unless you're doing some crazy farming at, say, level 20, where you are able to unlock the epic mode. And epic mode is basically like WoW heroics, yeah? You can only access them at max level. Oh, God. What the hell happened? Then you don't actually need to repeat this over and over again. And that's cool. It's like, oh, well, the surprises of a dungeon stay surprising because you're not going back there 100 damn times like you would in, say, World of Warcraft, where you've got, what, 8 or 9 heroic dungeons to keep you going. And, of course, you add those 2 more at the end with Zul'Gurub and Zul'Aman. Here it's just, well, there's just hundreds of the damn things. Needless to say, at maximum level, when you're farming raids and stuff like that, it will get to be a bit samey. But then again, it is mostly raid content that you're farming, as well as some of the epics. It's nice that they have such a variety as you level up, and then you can revisit some of them later on in epic mode, and it'll be a bit of a different experience for you. Not everything's available in epic mode, I have to just point that out. Obviously, if all the quests were available in epic mode, that would be ridiculous, but it's just nice that way, isn't it? And you can check on a wiki and check a strategy guide that things like this will happen. For instance, when I pulled that lever, I had no idea that, 1, it would try and trap me in there, and I'd have to take a specific path to get out, and 2, it would open a door that would actually unleash a bunch of monsters on the rest of my party, which is kind of neat, because then, of course, whoever's going to do that switch is panicking, because the party's going, oh god, we're covered in bees, and he has to run back as quickly as possible. It's just like, they actually considered what would happen. It's like, what would a party do in this situation? What happens if our rogue or our ranger or our bard who went to open that switch suddenly heard his party shouting with a voice chat, oh god, we need you back here right now, we're under heavy attack? They would panic, and they would try and get back through the jumping puzzle, and it would actually be kind of difficult for them. And they might fail, and they might die, and that's an interesting psychological approach to game design. I think it emphasizes what they keep saying about this game, which is this game has handcrafted dungeons and quests, and they do think a lot of them through. Don't get me wrong, they make mistakes from time to time. There are some quests that are either really boring or really just imbalanced and badly designed. Like, it's like, what are you doing, you know? This quest is not badly designed. It's hard, certainly, and it can get a bit frustrating because of the amount of casters there are, but you counter that by saying this is designed for a full group, not for you to solo or go in with 2 people. So we're making it harder on ourselves here. Doesn't mean to say that it won't be hard with a 6-man team, especially not on hard or on elite difficulty. Elite difficulty is about 4 times as difficult as this. Just bear that in mind. This is just on normal, and there are 4 difficulty modes. And I think it's the amount of care and attention that Turbine put into quests like this that really makes it stand apart. Okay, let's skip to the end boss, where I die horribly, and I'll show you the end of the dungeon. This gets a bit unpleasant. It turns out the vile alchemist that we've come to defeat is actually the Scorpion King. Oh god! Yeah, a little bit unpleasant. It's actually one of the CG-rendered models that you see in the intro movie for this game. He's also brought some friends as well. He's got some good crowd control, which is definitely not helpful for me at all. He's got a couple of those defenders which have the grease ability, plus a couple of casters and the assistant. So it's kind of nasty, and I get moided, I tells you, moided. Thankfully, ours is able to beat them. We did a good enough damage, and he's got reasonable armor plating, so he's able to defeat them eventually. Admittedly, he's flattening his ass from grease at the moment, but hey. So there's one thing I do want to mention as well, is I didn't quite explain all of the death system, because Sometimes you don't die. Sometimes you get incapacitated, and you will basically lie there bleeding out. And if you take more damage, you will actually die. But if you're incapacitated, somebody with the aid skill can actually get you up again. You've got to be good at it, admittedly. They can actually make it worse if they suck at it. They can kill you. But in this case, we didn't have the chance to do that. Alvis couldn't have aided me anyway, he was too busy. But in a full party, if somebody does get incapacitated and you're able to save them from further damage, you can aid them and you can get them back on their feet. If they die, though, that's it. You've got to carry them to a rest shrine, or they have to release and run. I'm fairly sure if you release and run, then you will lose a bonus that you would have got from not re-entering the dungeon. It's also a bonus that you can actually cancel by leaving the dungeon in order to get stuff. So going into a dungeon prepared does benefit you, certainly.
Water supply is safe for now.
There you go, and there's the scorecard for that dungeon. You can see what we managed to get. We got a conquest bonus right there, 25% for slaying all of the monsters, as well as a breakables bonus. We didn't get the full breakables bonus, but again, getting the full breakables bonus here is just hard. There's about 280 breakables in this dungeon. It's a big one, folks. It really, really is. And that is actually a level 4 quest. That's a low-level quest. They have no qualms doing that to you at low levels. And that's great, because you know what? It teaches you from a very early level that you are not going to get any free rides in this game, and there are going to be challenges which are going to be hard as nails, and that's good. I like that an awful lot. I think the fact that you can solo all the way up to maximum level in World of Warcraft is detrimental to the game, because it doesn't teach you how to play it properly. In this game, you cannot. You will just run into quests that you just can't do. Now, sure, you can go and pick another quest if you like. You don't have to be a completionist in this game. There's a lot of choice available. But I think WoW, because it really wants you to do all of the quests, is far too scared to do group stuff like this anymore. It's far too scared to have stuff that is genuinely difficult. Imagine how hard that would be at level 4, because we were level 6, and we are well geared. So think about that for a second. There you go, folks. It goes by the name of Proof is in the Poison. What a quest. I'll see you next time.